Now, back around 1991, this when Ellis for Sagging came out. N.W.A. is on top of the world. Then all of a sudden, you know, Cube leaves. You know, if you don't want to, can you sort of go through that?
Yeah, I got no problems with that. Of course, you know in the book, because I know that you've read it, because you and I, Jay Mace, have discussed it many times. In the book, it has whole chapters that are devoted to the Cube and Dr. Dre breakup. But I would tell you this, that Cube had a lot of people whispering in his ear about that he should be a solo artist. And, you know, he started to say that the traditional things that people say when they try and get out of their record contract, you know, that, oh, they're not treating me right, and they're not paying me fairly. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Because, you know, those royalty statements were drawn up by professionals and looked at by professionals on O'Shea Jackson's part, and he was just looking for an excuse to get out of his contract because the people at Priority were telling him that he should have a solo career. And Easy and I agreed that he should have a solo career, but we were going to do it at a little different. We were going to pace it a little differently.
Right.
But, you know, he was tremendously jealous of Easy. He was younger, and they were able to talk that kind of smack to him, and he believed it. And, you know, of course, he did leave the group at that time.
And then after that, it was like back and forth, diss track after another. They came out, N.W.A. came out with 100 Miles and Running. Then Ice Cube came out with No Vaseline.
I was afraid you were going to ask about that, James.
No, I'm not going to ask about No Vaseline. I was just saying that it was like a diss track after another and all of that. Then after that period, you know, Dr. Dre, you know, he like, when did Suge Knight come to the picture?
Suge Knight was a bodyguard for the DOC. We didn't want to have our artists around driving around when they were drinking. And when they'd go out to clubs, we always had a driver and a security person go with them. Suge Knight was one of those people. And then he started whispering, of course, in DOC's ear, and then DOC into Dre's ear, and then Michelet was Dre's girlfriend at the time. So they started this whole thing so that they could start. At the time, they were going to call it Death Row, but a guy named the Unknown DJ, who was one of the original Uncle Jam's Army, Andre Emanuel, owned that name. So I think when Suge Knight got involved, they changed it to Death Row.
Now, there was during the time when, Dr. Dre, he left to put out The Chronic. But when I was reading the book, it was like when The Chronic blew up, Easy was still getting money off of Dre.
Well, Dre was signed to Ruthless as a producer, as an artist, and as a writer. So Jimmy Iovine and Ted Field called me from Interscope and said, look, Jerry, we know you, we like you, we don't think Dre is ever going to record for you guys again, so why don't you come over and we'll try and work out a deal. And we went over there, and I was able to work out a deal with Jimmy Iovine. And I got to tell you that he was honorable about it, and he paid Easy literally millions of dollars, and we were able to work out a situation where Easy was going to share in Dre's revenue. But Dre wasn't going to pay him. Actually, Jimmy Iovine at Interscope was going to pay him. And when Easy died in March 26th of 1995, and I left the company, Ruthless was still sharing in the proceeds of Dr. Dre's success.
Now, we're going to go back to the 60s on this question. We're going to come right back to the rap. Now, you had an encounter with the man that is like considered like the man in the music biz, two of the big heavyweights, David Geffen and Clive Davis. Tell me a little bit about those two individuals.
Well, I think that David Geffen is probably from another planet. It was like dealing with Albert Einstein, and he and I grew up together in the business. We both started off as agents. He's a super kind of. He was a super agent, he was a super manager, he was a super record producer, he was a super film producer, and now, of course, he's one of the owners of DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg. Of course, Clive Davis was the giant of our business. In 1970, he was already the president of Columbia Records, which was what Interscope is today. Columbia Records was the prestige class label of the music business. Clive was the president, and he actually gave me my own label in 1970 called Great Western Gramophone, which was a joint venture between Clive at Columbia and myself. But these guys were unbelievable, and I got involved in a little dispute with them over a guy named Danny Fogelberg, who is managed by Irving Azoff, who today manages the Eagles and Jimmy Buffett and Aerosmith and Christina Aguilera and Elton John. So I got in a little dispute with him. Irving was working for me, and it was over a Danny Fogelberg deal. Irving had played the tape for Clive Davis, and Clive said, I really like this guy, but he's not ready yet. I played it for David Geffen. Geffen loved it. And then we went back and played the same tape for Clive and told him these were Danny's new songs, and he just fell in love with it, even though it was the same songs he had heard before. Mm-hmm. And they got in a bidding war over it, and I awarded Danny Fogelberg to Clive for his Epic Records label. And Geffen, of course, got furious with me and really probably didn't talk to me for 4 or 5 years after that, mm-hmm. which was... you don't ever want to be on the wrong side of David Geffen. He's a very formidable adversary, mm-hmm. and he's one of the great stars of the music business. I have nothing but respect for both Clive and David Geffen, and I see nobody today that really have the kind of savvy and savoir-faire and musical talent and knowledge that David and Clive did in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Now, also in the book, when you said that you were working with Marvin Gaye, you had a chance to encounter with Mr. Berry Gordy, the man behind Motown Records. And I was reading that what he used to do with new artists, he'll take some money, put it in a paper bag, and put it up front. And it was like, hey, take the money, you know, if you can. So what was it like working with Mr. Gordy and Marvin Gaye when Motown was at their peak?
It's funny because Barry and I are about the same age, and I call him Mr. Gordy. I award him the utmost respect because I look back and look at the artists that I've loved over the years, and I say to myself, who's the greatest female group ever? Well, that's the Supremes. What label were they on? Motown. Who's the greatest male group? The Temptations? Four Tops? What label were they on? Well, they were on Motown. Who was the greatest kids group of all time? Jackson 5? What label were they on? Motown. Who's one of the greatest male vocalists? Marvin Gaye. What label was he on? Motown. What label was Stevie Wonder on? Motown. Anybody that I love and respect seemed to start with Berry Gordy at Motown Records. So I really have nothing but great things to say about Mr. Gordy, and he certainly is one of the most important people of the entire musical panorama. Mm-hmm. And Eazy-E had a goal to be like Berry Gordy, and I think if he wouldn't have been stricken down by AIDS, you know, at such a young age, I think that he would have gone on to become the Berry Gordy of this generation. Right,
because I read, too, at the end of the book, before his passing, he was looking into the whole Latino rap explosion and was trying to sign a Latino rap group, knowing that, you know, this was going to blow up, and sure enough, it blew up years later, you know, with reggaeton. You had Daddy Yankee, Tego Calderon, and so Eazy-E was ahead of the curve on that one.